Nilou, our dancing queen. And so she's gonna be coming on the banner very soon. And as usual guys, today we're gonna be having a video discussing her pre-release information to have a basic understanding of her potential and then ultimately kind of like helping you to decide whether or not it's gonna be a good decision for you to pull for or not. Now, since of course this is only pre-release information, so anything that we have discussed in this video will have the potential to change once official release. So just take everything we discuss here in the video a grain of salt for now. And so with that, let's just dive into the video. First off, we're going to be going in depth into her skill and kits so that everyone here on this video is basically on the same page of what she is gonna do. Nilou's gonna be getting bonus HP on her ascension, because if you didn't already know, she's just basically gonna be having everything onto her HP. Her normal attack is going to be having a 3 consecutive sword strike, and the only thing that's actually good about it is that her animation on the sword strike on her normal attack is actually very good. Other than that, we are not ever going to be using this. What's most important though is gonna be her E skill, in which, to simplify everything down to you, whenever you press her E skill, it's gonna first off deal hydro damage to nearby opponents based on Nilou's max HP, and then right after that she'll go in a state which called period, where if you continue to press her normal attack, she would now have a hydro infusion onto her sword and continuously deal a 3-hit strike for up to 8 seconds. However, if you continue to press her E skill again, she will go into whirling step stance, where she will also deal 3 hits, but at the end of the 3rd hit, there will be a hydro ring that surrounds your active character for up to 12 seconds at C0. And when anyone is within the AoE of the hydro ring, they are going to be affected by hydro. So a little bit to how Barbara E skill works, but this has a much wider AoE. And then her burst is pretty simple. She will first deal an instance of AoE hydro damage and then applying what's called a lingering Eon effect onto all of the opponent hits. Then after a while, which is basically 1 to 2 seconds, the enemies will take another instance of damage from the lingering Eon effect. This has a cooldown of 18 seconds and a 70 energy requirement cost, which is already kind of like on the higher end scales of energy requirements for a burst. Now on top of all the skills that Nilou has, her passive talent is basically her most important, and it is what makes up Nilou's gameplay, in which basically when Nilou is run in a Dendro and Hydro character only team, she will grant all of your nearby character what's called a Golden Chalice bounty for up to 30 seconds after using her E skill. Now what this does is that whenever your character is hit by a Dendro attack, all of your members on the team will have 100 EM bonus, and considering that you're basically gonna get hit by Dendro cores, which is technically Dendro damage, you're always gonna have this effect applied. Now what's more important though is that whenever you're dealing bloom reactions, it will create bountiful cores, which is kind of similar to Dendro cores. However, what's different though is that instead of taking around 6 seconds for it to explode like the Dendro cores, it will basically explode almost instantly after like half a second or so and have a much wider AoE. This core cannot trigger Hyper Bloom and Burgeon, so basically will only work in Bloom team. And then her second passive talent is also very good, because for every 1000 points of Nilou max HP above 30k, it will cause the bountiful core's damage to increase by 9%. And the maximum increase of this is up to 400%, which is only achievable if Nilou's HP is like 75k, and you're never going to be getting that for a free-to-play build, so you don't really have to worry about this, and just stack as much HP as you can onto Nilou. So from everything we have seen so far, we know that Nilou scale everything off of her HP, even from her personal damage, from basically her burst damage or her sword stance damage. It scales off of HP, and the bountiful cores that she drops from her passive will also get the benefits of Nilou HP, which will affect a lot in how we build her in terms of her artifacts, and we'll touch on that once we go into the artifact sections. However, due to her passive works, this affects tremendously in terms of how Nilou team is gonna run, because as we have known, her best potential only applies when she runs in a pure Dendro and Hydro team only, therefore making her a character which is very niche into Bloom team basically basically most of the time, making the number of team variations that Nilou actually have very limited as well, and it's basically only 1 to 2 good team at most at the time being, in which her best team build right now that we can have with Nilou is going to be Nilou, HOYO-MiX, Dendro MC, and Nahida. Now of course Nahida is not released yet and basically her information is not complete, but we basically have some of her leaks information right now and we know that she's going to be a support Dendro character. So this team here is going to be Nilou running with her best potential, because HOYO-MiX here is going to be helping the team out with healing. Sad thing is that we're not going to be seeing any Dendro healer in quite some time unless we have some unexpected 4-star Dendro healer that HOYOverse announced. So HOYO-MiX is technically the best healer when it comes to Dendro reaction as a whole and when it comes to Nilou Bloom team right now. Then that gives us a Hydro Resonance, and then having another 2 Dendro character, adding Dendro MC here, making us a Dendro Resonance. Or if you're running on a complete free-to-play team, then we have Nilou, Barbara, Collei, and Dendro MC, which on paper works as a Bloom team, but on how efficient this team is going to perform, I would say that it's actually rather bad. Now I'm not saying Barbara and Collei here are bad characters, because there aren't technically any bad character in Genshin Impact, but the way that their skills work along with Nilou doesn't complement her playstyle too good, because Barbara E skill doesn't help your team apply Hydro that good due to its lack of AoE range. And Collei though can apply Dendro pretty good. Her burst is technically only 6 seconds if you're running her at C0, which is very short, and both Barbara and Collei lacks off-field damage. Therefore you're relying pretty much on Nilou or your Dendro MC character to deal damage on this specific team. Now another team that you can basically potential run is gonna be Nilou, Xingqiu, Yelan, and Dendro MC, which is us basically focusing on Nilou being on the on-field driver and then dealing as much damage as she can along with off-field damage from Xingqiu and Yelan. So this I would say basically a pretty fun team to run, because it's kind of like confirmed that Xingqiu and Yelan will work with Nilou from some of Nilou's leaked gameplay, but obviously we'll have to test out again once Nilou officially arrives to confirm whether Xingqiu and Yelan actually works with her. But the only problem with this team though is that we don't have a dedicated healer, and Xingqiu is going to be the main healing source of the team. However, since we're going to be building a lot of HP onto Nilou and then we'll have her on the on-field driver, she will be having a lot of HP to tank out a lot of the damage that is going to be there. So we won't know how well the team works until we officially test it out, but at the current time being, as we have seen, her best team comp is very limited. Now you can also consider the other reaction team as well, like Vaporize and Taser, which yes, Nilou works with it, but she won't be able to make use of both of her passive talents. Plus we've already got so many better Vaporize character as well as Taser character to run in that specific reaction team, so I don't really see any reason why to have Nilou in any of these reaction teams. Now moving on to Nilou's best artifact. Her best in slot for the time being, I would say is gonna be 2-piece Tenacity with 2-piece Flex, because the only main thing you want with Nilou is basically HP, and the other thing is just gonna be technically a bonus for Nilou. Now the thing with artifacts right now is that we don't have a dedicated HP scaling artifact for the time being yet, or in other words, we don't have a BIS artifact option for Nilou. When it comes to HP scalings, we only have 2-piece Tenacity, which is okay for the time being, and then the other 2-piece I would say you can run either with 2-piece Heart of Depth or 2-piece Wanderer to support more in terms of her personal damage. Now the most important thing though is how you build your artifact stats, in that the best stats that you want to go with right now is going to be full HP, HP, HP. You can also build as if she is a DPS character, in that it's going to be HP, Hydro, and then crits. However, it's not going to be as well as the 3 HP stat sets. Reason being is that Nilou scales everything off of HP, as we have discussed in her skill sections, and her passive talents help with HP as well from the Bountiful Course. So if you were to be building building a DPS set and then getting a hydro damage as well as crit rate to a higher level, the bountiful core's damage will be lost because you're not going to be having as much HP as Nilou would. And since that she will be having a lot of bountiful core drops when you're running on her team as well, it's basically quite a lot of DPS loss. So therefore full HP build is generally gonna be better, and then you try to get as much crit rate and crit damage on her substat as much as you can. Moving on to Nilou's best weapons is actually pretty interesting because there are quite a few ones to discuss. Now first off, her BIS option is for sure gonna be the best, hands down, nothing to discuss about that. Next, best weapons, when it comes to you not investing into any of the 5-star, are gonna be the Sack Sword or the Favonius Sword. Reason being, these swords first of all are just very good and it gives her a lot of energy recharge so that she can get more of a burst uptime. And since her E skills activation is pretty short with a long cooldown of 18 seconds, Sack Sword here I would say is gonna be taking a basically better place in her weapons. It will be a lot easier for you when you're messing up a rotation here and there. Plus it can still give Nilou pretty good energy recharge for herself as well. Favonius Sword isn't bad, but you need to build a little bit of crit on her to make sure that you get its passive activated. So that's the reason why it falls a little bit behind the Sack Sword, but both are really good. So you can just choose which one you're having a better refinement on your account. After that, it's gonna be Jade Cutter because of course it gives her a lot of crit rate with decent personal damage buff, and it also have HP passive of up to 20%, which is pretty decent as well. So if you're favoring your Nilou to have a bit of personal damage, you can go with Jade Cutter very well. Right after that, it's gonna be the Festering Desire. Now I know that many of us now actually don't have access to Festering, but if you do, it's pretty good because it increases the E skill by a very good amount, plus giving her energy recharge as well, so it's a very solid option to run on Nilou. After that, it's gonna be the Cyphos as well as the Iron Sling. These two swords are gonna be giving you EM. Of course, the Cyphos you have to pull on Nilou's weapon in order for you to get it, and you can only activate the Cyphos passive best when you're building Nilou's Elemental Mastery, which isn't too ideal because we want to invest as much HP as we can onto Nilou. And then finally, if you don't really have any other option, you can go with the Sap Wood because it does give energy recharge plus a EM buff to the team member that picks up the leaf. However, the consistency isn't always there, so I would say a solid option best would be either her BIS if you have it, then the Sack or the Favonius Sword for a free to play option. And then of course onto her Constellation. I know that many of us would be considering to go for her Const as well because I personally would say her Constellations are pretty decent. Her C1 gives her Luminous Illusion damage an increase of 65%, in which Luminous Illusion damage is basically the third hit of her sword stance, so it won't be the whole of her sword stance and only the last hit, but a 65% increase on the last hit with pretty decent scaling at first already is quite good. And then in terms of her Hydro Aura, there's gonna be a 6 seconds extension, which is a total of 18 seconds, or in other words, her aura now is gonna be having 100% uptime if you decide to go into support Nilou. Now overall, in terms of the amount of Primogems you might have to invest into getting her C1, I wouldn't say it's a too worth it of a constellation for you to actually go into, because an extra 6 seconds seems to be okay, but you're not always gonna be needed because a 12-second uptime on her Hydro Aura is quite long already. And for the 65 damage increase on the last hit of her sword stance, you might not always gonna be using her sword stance, so again, that's not gonna be always functional for you. However, her C2 is basically one of her best constellation for when the character that is affected by the Golden Chalice bounty deal Hydro damage to the opponent, they get a Hydro resistant decrease of 35% for a 10-second. And after that, if a Bloom reaction deals damage to that opponent, they get a Dendro resistant decrease of 35% for 10 seconds as well. Now the 10 seconds here we almost never have to take into consideration because your team is always gonna have the Golden Chalice bounty affected, so this will always technically happen. And also, resistant decrease in Genshin Impact is still one of the skills that not all characters have access to, so this is pretty good. Not to mention the Deepwood set that you will be running on your team as well, giving you a further Dendro resistant decrease. So this overall, I would say if you're a Dolphin player and you love Nilou, I would say C2 is one of her best best stopping point for you to go with. C3 increased her burst damage, and then C4 is that whenever she finished using her E skill, she gets a 15 elemental energy regain, and the damage of her burst is increased by 50%, which is a pretty decent increase for burst damage. And then for C6, of course, it's only for worlds only, is that for every 1000 point of max HP Nilou has, her crit rate and crit damage is increased by 0.6 and 1.2% respectively, and a maximum increase of 30 and 60% can be gained. So in order for you to get the maximum increase, that would basically equals to a 50k HP Nilou, but if you already get her to a C6 level, you're of course going to be having her weapon as well. Therefore a 50k Nilou is basically obtainable. And so that's basically us going very in depth into Nilou's skill and kit. So I do believe that everyone here have already have a basic understanding of everything about her. Now coming to the most important question of the video is that will she be worth it for you to pull on your account? So when looking at Nilou again, we can see that she is a very niche character, just one level above a mono team requirement, because she can only work best on a full bloom team with Dendro and Hydro character. Therefore her team comps is basically very limited, and I would say only have access to one team comp, which is best for her at the time being. But on top of that, the cast of character that runs well with her are also limited, in that Nahida, which would be one of her best support character, is not released as of the point her banner comes, and since Nahida is her best support, it would mean that you're technically required to pull the next 5-star character right after Nilou in order for her to perform as well as she can. Even though I don't know why anyone would skip on our cute little Nahida. And then her next best support would also be Kokomi, because unfortunately there is no healer Dendro at this point, let alone a good Dendro healer to replace Kokomi. So you'd want to have Kokomi on your account. Now you can technically have Xingqiu in Kokomi's place if you're good at iframing, but considering the fact that you take damage from Dendro bountiful cores, I don't think that you can iframe through that. Then finally we have our Dendro MC, which thank god HOYO-verse actually gives us a good Dendro main character as a Dendro support to run for Dendro reaction teams. And then you can also use a F2P team like we've discussed, but Barbara and Cole are really hard to make efficient team run out, since Barbara has just little AoE range from her E skills for Hydro applications, and Cole Dendro burst upfield time is very little, plus it has little range also. So in general, we can see that Nilou is technically not free to play character, but requires a lot of investment into her teams in order for her to run well. I'm not sure if this is actually a good move from HOYO-verse side to actually release a character like this when we're not having that much support character to accommodate her playstyle. Therefore, meta discussion with Nilou is basically out of the question, because we know that there will never be a requirement for Bloom team to actually become meta. Nilou will only fit on your account if you love her as a character or you already have the good support character that she runs with on your account. Otherwise, you will have to put up with her niche playstyle. However, that aside, I'm sure that she won't be a bad character in terms of dealing damage, because all her kits revolve around HP scaling, and she will be able to create a lot of bountiful cores with her team, resulting in very good numbers of damage on field. Plus her gameplay and team run can rather be fun because it is niche. She will be one of a special character that have her own special team and playstyle, so that's a good thing about it. Now since we kind of see that her support options and the character or teams that she can run with are rather limited right now, it's a good thing that we want to discuss and see how her future potential can increase when more characters arrive. In that, for me personally, how I think the character that can help her to do even better is that we may want another good Dendro healer just like Kokomi with a decent Dendro application, because the problem with Kokomi right now is that she doesn't have too good off-field damage, plus her Hydro application requires so much on her jellyfish positioning, because if you go out of its AoE, you're stuck with waiting for Kokomi's E skill to end. And so having a good Dendro healer here will allow Kokomi to be replaced and then have character, for example, like Yelan and Xingqiu to be on the team who are very good off-field damage dealer, and then overall increase your team damage output. Next is that I would love to see a HP buffer character to come, because right now attack buffer is the most common buff, then we already have elemental damage damage boost as well as EM and a very niche defense buffer like Goro, yet we lack someone who actively gives HP to the team. So having that character here can potentially increase Nilou damage ceiling. And so that's all I can think of in terms of a better future support for Nilou. I would love to hear more of you guys' thoughts down in the comment section in terms of how we can better her playstyle and support character in Nilou's team. And so guys, that's everything I have to say in terms of this video. I hope that it has been very enjoyable and helpful to you before Nilou banners arrive. Of course, again, this is only a pre-release discussion, so we definitely have to wait until her officially released for us to see the whole potential of Nilou. So guys, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe as I will be posting a lot of Nilous on this week to come. Plus, be sure to join my Discord server as well, as we usually hold a lot of giveaways to help you get the characters that you want. With that, I wish you a super day and I will catch you on my next video.